Hello and welcome to another episode of Digi-Tools in Accrual World, brought to you by the digital disruptors. We are covering a whole batch of news today, some interesting things that you might have already heard about, but we're going to give it a little bit more sweat and juice and blood and tears and all the good stuff that lets you be more informed about the accounting tech apps in our space, kicking off with QuickBooks. We'll talk a little bit about Starling. We're going to cover some interesting news and a bit of a groundbreaking piece that's just been launched by Briefcase. So we're going to get straight into that in a moment. But before we go any further, we're joined today by a wonderful man that I've recently come to know, and I love the sound of his voice, so hopefully this is great listening for you as well. It's Robbie from Mazars. Robbie, say hello to everyone and please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. It is so amazing to be here. Awesome to join you, Indi and John. So a little bit about me. I am a partner in Forvis Mazars. I lead innovation for our firm, and I also have the joy of looking after AI inside of the firm at a global level. Lots of very interesting things on the go at the moment, as you can imagine. But it's great to be here today.
It's great to have you, Robbie, and it's great to have you on the future podcast, hopefully, and it will be even more amazing because I'd love to know your perspectives on the lovable, affable idiot that is John Toon. Tell me, how long have you known this fella and what do you think of him?
Oh, you got to be so careful with telling people how long you've known John for. It's always an interesting conversation. But we've had several years now. I think we're up to about 4 or 5 years, John. I was thinking about it the other day. And lots of exciting stories along the way, I'm sure, which we could share over several discussions. But the joy has been always interesting conversations around tech and plenty of discussions around kind of what we think the future's going to look like and things. So it's been awesome, been really, really fun. And I'm sure there'll be some banter today, no doubt.
John, you've been on mute long enough. Let's hear you. How you going? You ready for today's episode?
I'm hanging to go, as you can tell, given that I arrived, like 2 minutes before we started recording. I'm late on a train down to London, so it's all been a bit of a rush. We'll see how we go.
And your sound today it leaves a lot to be desired. So, are you struggling to attract the right talent? Are you needing to shift the busy work? Are you finding you don't have time to speak to clients? Trusted for over 20 years, the Advanced Track outsourcing model provides immediate access to accounting and tax experts who understand your local regulations and seamlessly integrate into your team. Digital transformation, robust security measures, top-tier talent, no recruitment fees, no wait time. Focus on what truly matters, growing and improving your business and positively impacting the lives of your clients. Be more than just number crunchers, be life changers. I'm going to kick us off straight out the gate. QuickBooks is moving away from the old sole trader experience, and it is a great new version. I'm going to call it a great new version, but it is a nuance rather than just a forced upgrade. So if you haven't already heard about this, yes, there's a learning curve, but if this idiot can do it, then I think most of the other people can do it. Things like categorizing transactions, navigating the old banking area, it feels a bit different at first, but it's not a straight swap, so you do have to rewire how you think about it slightly. Once you get past that, it's a better product. I think you've got stronger data capture, more robust reporting, and importantly, AI is starting to genuinely assist with the categorization and reconciliation pieces. So it's not just a little bit of a gimmick, but it actually feels much closer to a proper accounting software now for sole traders, rather than a simplified side tool. And I think that really matters with MTD coming in, because sole traders are going to need something they can actually scale with them. So I think this makes really good sense. The only real issue, I think, is timing. Yes, it was rolled out a bit tight to the deadline. We can 100% agree that, that was not the best thing to do. It does add a bit of friction, but then again, who doesn't love a little bit of drama before a major deadline's about to kick in place? Hey, Robbie, what do you think?
I was about to say, who doesn't love drama before a deadline? I put my hand up sometimes on that. I mean, I think it's coming late to the party on this one was quite a big step. I think it's obviously a change, and I think lots of people are wondering how the heck they get it done in time. I mean, there's been some fantastic clips out there around, why did you do this at the last minute? And I guess that's the question, if this has been available, and as you say, if the product's, up to scratch, then really could have given people more time to switch, I think, is my big answer. Yes, it makes logical sense and great to have some of the AI assistants built in and everything else, but I do think it's quite close to the timeline and the amount of people that are worried about MTD. I personally think it's quite a big shift this late on. But yeah, I guess that's my view. I don't know, John. What have you seen from your side?
I think it's obviously it's a late change, and no one likes that. But we're also seeing some people come out with products ready for the deadline. So it's I think we could see this over the next few weeks as people roll around. And actually, I think we might see some new products launched later in the year as people suddenly realise there's an opportunity with MTD.
Yeah. I mean, I know from my side, the one thing I did immediately notice was at the same time, Sage had released a report around the amount of sole traders, which is obviously what this specific tool was focused around, the amount of sole traders which are worried about MTD. And they reckon around 70% of people are not prepared for MTD, which is really interesting considering that they've just gone into a massive partnership. Sage has just gone into this massive partnership with Barclays. And as they've kind of launched into this saying, we're going to go and solve this problem, they believe they're spending around 24 days, sole traders spending around 24 days a year managing their time on financial admin. That's huge. That's an extra month that they're talking about doing this work. And in conjunction with Barclays, they've launched this kind of joint go-to-market, which makes it really easy for sole traders or SMEs to engage with the platform through their bank, have both the bank and the GL in one place, single integrated system. So I just think it's a huge step, where you've got kind of all of this work around a product which is obviously, as Indi said, live and ready. I think the other side is, well, here's a tool which does MTD. It's integrated now into your bank. I think that's quite a big step towards what users want, really.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because we've also got Starling doing the same.
Well, I think what's also exciting is you look at, I don't know if you noticed, but Starling also just happened to launch their new AI app. So the Starling Assistant, which is, I use Starling, so I can say it's really cool. It's really interesting what they're doing with it, being able to set up, immediately talking to your assistant to set things up. It's a great new feature, but it does start to stretch into what else might they do. And as these kind of relationships start to build, or the type of technology that you're going to need to support them, I do still think there's the joy is these are maybe sole practitioners or SME businesses, but as they grow, the need to link into other tools just becomes increasingly a part of what they need in the ecosystem.
I really like how Sage is going about this and going through the back door in a way that they are, okay, you're not leaving your banking interface when you go to Barclays. It's a Barclays UI. And then you've seen Sage also do something with SumUp in the same way. Done something with Tide, they've done something with Monzo. So they're really making themselves this hidden infrastructure, which makes them super sticky. And I think that's very different from, like you said, maybe Starling approaching this. Love the fact that, again, that innovation is coming, but it's showing at the bank level, we need to have a level of sophistication that exists, because that's where, as someone that, you go to your bank as a small business, you go to your bank first. It is more real time. It is where actually you're more concerned about the cash at bank. And I think that this really works well for the very small business, but everyone that falls under MTD, it works super well. I think it's very clever.
Well, and I think, what does that mean for accountants that are supporting these people? What does it mean for finance? If it's simpler for a person on a day-to-day basis running a business to be able to do what they need to do, that's amazing. But there's still going to be a need as that grows for more integration to other areas, particularly as they start to get more complex as a business. And I do think that's Indi, to your point, like if I can make it really easy, or if we can make it really easy for clients to use the tech without seamlessly, then it's really where else do you need to start to add value, which I think is key. And I do think on that point, one of the areas that we've seen lots of integration with, obviously, whether it be on Sage or any other kind of tool that's in the space, has been with Dext. And Dext has been kind of one of these tools that everybody has in their toolkit. And what's been amazing is the launch of the new Dext AI and how they're starting to allow this to your point, that interface, that simple interface that a person could add, how do we easily start to leverage that and easily start to say, okay, what more can we do? And I found that with the Dext AI, what it really starts to do is take away where individuals, everything's stuck in somebody's brain. Where do I post this to? I screen this, I take an invoice and it needs to go into a certain area. I know where it goes, but traditionally we had to post it and manually do all of the work in the back end. That's now starting to become done by AI, which is amazing, but also more importantly makes this kind of intuitive interface that we keep talking about. So if you can go in through an example, Barclays, and get into Sage and see where you are, you could start to say, okay, well, any of my invoices I immediately want to post, directly. And it just, again, the intuitive nature, the focus on a user and how we make that really, really clear is clearly where they're all going. I've just loved, though, Dext as a tool is something we've seen obviously across our toolkits globally, and I think it's awesome in tech. But the fact that they're now starting to layer in this AI in areas we need it is actually really useful. So that's been our experience. I don't know. I mean,
Robbie, which parts have you seen it's kind of really being quite disruptive on? Because there's a lot of different technologies that are coming out in this kind of pre-accounting world of automations. And I guess, like we just said, we've just said about QuickBooks and it's got its AI, but it's more at the SME layer, which is helping in the kind of categorizing of transactions, the scanning receipts and cleaning things up. But Dex is it seems much more at the practice layer, I guess, capturing that firm level judgment and scaling it across clients. So how is that going to help you with that?
Well, I think the big thing for us is, again, there's certain simple transactions that are pretty standard. We know how they should be processed. We know kind of standard operating procedures that we follow on those. And this just allows us to codify those, not to just rely on individuals to do it, but to start to actually automate that process and look at real opportunity for clients to see benefit. And even, what we're seeing with clients or people just generally that we speak to on this topic is it takes away some of the initial expectations we have on individuals. These people know where, for example, these invoices or whatever it may be need to be put. If we can start to codify that, then it gets away from being based on a person sat in a desk doing a piece of work, and it gets to, okay, well, this is the consistent process that we follow, and automating that process. Again, there's lots of ways we probably would have done that in the past, but this just makes it easier, and it's embedded into the process, the ways of working and the processes that we already have, I think. Very
clever. Correspondent from the north, what do you think?
I really like this kind of implementation that we're seeing from Dext, particularly because this is the ideal thing that people want from a business tool, is this ultimate personalization. And fundamentally, that's what Dext are offering with this tool, is the ability to say, just because I'm in this particular industry doesn't mean that I want to build my accounts out in the same way as a competitor, because I've got a different way of analyzing my information, and learning from the history and applying that consistently, I think is really cool.
Love it. And okay, we've got something from Briefcase now. They released something that was fixing the sort of last 10% of bookkeeping. So they launched fixed assets. On the surface, it sounds pretty standard, but I think it's quite telling because most AI bookkeeping tools have gone after pretty obvious stuff first, like the data capture and the things that we've said, the reconciliation, the categorization. What they've avoided is edge cases, so things like fixed assets, depreciation, capital versus expense. And that's the stuff that we said that requires the judgment. So Briefcase is moving into this space, and that's them saying we're not just doing this easy 80% anymore, because the real, I guess, bottleneck in accounting isn't the volume, it's the complexities. We've seen loads of people that can automate the receipts, but very few tools can confidently handle, is this capital or not? And then more importantly, explain it. So this is a feature launch, but it is a signal that these tools are moving closer to the accounting territory and still not replacing them, but getting closer to the line. And I will also add on that we have something that was just released this morning, and Robbie and I were having a good old thrash of a chat over this. Briefcase have also just announced that they are launching Briefcase One, the AI native MTD platform that's built for sole traders and landlords. entering MTD in the next couple of weeks. So it's huge. Firms are pretty much able to register a client, connect the bank, capture the documents, reconcile with the AI autopilot that reads the documents, it suggests the coding and matches the bank transactions. There's high confidence around the high confidence matches auto-published, and the platform learns from every transaction as they have done for however many years under Briefcase currently. And then it also submits to HMRC. So it's built as a ledger, not a workaround. So it's not a bridging software or a spreadsheet tool. It's a full double entry digital ledger, meaning that the firms build a genuine asset with every client they onboard. This is super clever. They have got opportunity to be truly disruptive in this space, and it handles the full filing cycle, so quarterly updates, VAT returns, year-end final declarations, and it removes the need for separate tools and workflows for year end. So it's the whole shebang, really, and it's going to be available from today, which is the day that this podcast's released. It's like absolutely never unheard of, but we brought you something that's breaking news. But the prices start at £9 per client. Robbie, you were waxing lyrical about this. Tell me, what do you think?
Well, I think let's just take a step back from the tool itself and just into kind of Briefcase and some of the work that they've done. The incredible thing is, I met with some of the Briefcase leadership a while back, and we were talking about the development that they were doing and kind of what it was looking like. And what was amazing, I think what's been really great to see, is the speed at which this has come out. They're really responding to what the needs are. And we had a conversation with them at the time, which said, great guys, their core product at the time, what was Briefcase One then, and is obviously now integrated with MTD functionality. We were saying it needs MTD. It's going to be released. We're not going to, we need to understand from you how you're going to solve for these types of things. And again, they were just asking, we were having the conversation on feedback. But what's been awesome is just the speed at which they've turned that back and said, okay, how can we solve that problem and what does it look like? And where it is massively different as a solution is it's looking to automate out some of those processes. So instead of just saying you do MTD and it gives you everything that you then need to file and the practices that we would maybe normally follow, it's actually automating some of that process as well. So saying, you spoke about it, Indi, the automated filing at HMRC is really, really interesting. I mean, there will be caution with that, of course. But I guess the other side, if you're a sole trader or a smaller business, SME, this really speeds up some of the time. And if we go back to the very beginning, as I was saying, there is research which says 70% of people see this as a problem and that they're spending 24 days a year doing it. If this is another example of how we take time back, so we get more time back to not focus on dealing with MTD and to solve this problem, amazing. So I think it's fantastic. I mean, having seen a little bit with the team at Briefcase what it looks like, it's really explainable. It is obviously a lot of what they've done is built on a generative platform, but they've kind of worked out how to build that in an explainable approach, which is super helpful if you're considering governance and still getting asked those difficult questions about, it's AI, can you tell me what it does? There's a really good explanation behind it. So that's been, yeah.
And I'm going to build on that because this is for me is like disruptive. It's a purpose-built ledger. It's underpinned by AI, a multimodal model that they have already been processing millions of documents with for accounting firms in the UK. John, what do you think? Should we have really invested in this early on? They've only raised 3 million in seed funding. Can you believe that? These guys are on a winner.
Yeah, I think when you look at some of the stuff that the Briefcase team put out, aside from obviously the products, they're in deep on the AI side, and as Robbie said, this is much more reassuring, I think, than just the black box of we put stuff in and something else comes out. We're not quite sure how we get there, but I read a blog from one of I think it's from the head of product the other day, and it's talking about how the training of AI models has changed in the last 18 months. and how they're utilizing that to help with their decision making. And for me as an accountant looking at that, and a bit of a techie nerd as well, like it's really fascinating because it's really interesting to sort of see how they're kind of building layers of judgment, if you like, into the product, and also layers of kind of decision making into the product that provide that reassurance. And also, actually, whilst I was listening to Robbie speak, I was just thinking, isn't it really interesting that here in the UK, the amount of innovation that we see as a consequence of like government choices, when it comes to things like MTD, when it comes to things like open banking a while back, and some of the changes. And I know that accountants in the majority kind of bitch and moan about these things, but actually it has had like transformational effects on our lives, both from a business point of view, but also from a technology point of view. And I just think that's really, really interesting. And this is why I wish sometimes that the government will speed up some of their legislative agenda when it comes to some of these things to kind of promote more of this kind of innovation that I think we have. One thing that maybe we kind of missed in the noise of all this was like, I think Robbie said that the research was something like 70% of people are not ready for MTD. And I think when we were at Fab a couple of weeks ago, the Accounting Web released something at the same time saying something like only like 10% of people are even sort of ready and signed up. So there's definitely like a huge like gap here that needs to be closed up. And with all of this technology, it's really interesting to see who's going to be responsible for closing that gap. Is it going to be the vendors? Is it going to be us, the accountants? Is it going to be HMRC? Is it going to be the people paying the tax ultimately?
And I'm going to come back to that in a mo. But before we do come back to that, maybe Robbie, you can tell us about Revolut, because
Sure.
I know that you've got something on that.
So we've heard something about Starling, we've heard something about Barclays, and then Revolut goes and gets a banking license in the UK. Huge step, not to be underestimated, but just purely in terms of what does it mean for them to be able to get that? They've had to go through hoops on governance. They are now officially seen as a bank in a similar way to many of the large established banks. And interestingly, they continue to grow. I know that they're busy, as you might tell, a fair amount about South Africa, and they're busy applying for banking licenses into Africa as well. So this just continues to expand where their growth goes, taking their technology and kind of growing it into those areas. And importantly, if we relate back to the other conversations, they're not just going in as a digital bank into those spaces. They're taking with them a whole bunch of tools and predefined technology, which for people in finance is massive. Integrations into Revolut is really easy. And some of the work that they are already looking at around how they can make that more seamless is crucial for us. So I think given what we're seeing with Barclays teaming up with Sage and some of the information that John shared around Starling, we can expect as Revolut starts to grow in this market, I think, to see even more tech come into that space. But it's just I also happen to have a Revolut account. And what's really interesting about things like that is you see this technology just going at speed. And this is a classic example of moving at speed into a traditional, really established market and seeing how you can disrupt.
So you've got a Revolut account, you've got a Starling account. I'm learning a lot about you today. Very digital first.
Well, I was going to say that the fun in games is half the time it's just easy to do these things and to try them. I mean, that's been the fun.
Love it. And also, actually, just building on that one point about Revolut, it's really good that they're going this direction, because we've had so many businesses in the past. We heard from Alex Falcon, who had a major fraud that occurred with her business. So I think this is giving more protection to a lot more SMEs that have used Revolut in the past or have maybe thought against using Revolut. This will give them a bit more protection as well. So I think all round it's a great innovation. They're absolutely smashing it. Let's bloody well hope that they don't leave us an IPO in the US, because at that point we will be so heartbroken.
Well, and I mean, they have to expand into the US next. I mean, that's just the most logical growth. And they've shared their intentions to do that. Obviously, regulation, again, they'll have to jump through a bunch of hoops, and that will be no doubt challenging. But equally, I think it's super exciting to see that a digital first bank literally no branches available is able to grow A, this quickly, and B, into established markets.
And one question on this. I mean, do you guys have an opinion on like why Revolut have been so successful, compared to say like Monzo or Starling and others? Because they seem to have grown so quickly, and yet they're the last of those people to get the banking license. And there has been criticism of them in the past in terms of like the controls and some of the stuff that they put in place.
Well, again, I imagine that there's the market is incredibly fast growing, so they're not, there's lots of competition out there. I think the reason I would assume that they've gone more slowly is because they've taken a cautious growth path into those markets. I mean, the more governance there is, the more complicated it becomes. I think, they've tried to also stay independent of large banks. So where some of the other brands have taken some funding from larger banks, that may create more complexity, whereas Revolut has, I think, largely stayed independent of all of that, allowing them, obviously they get the challenge then, which is why don't you have the same things as our traditionally established banks? But it's challenging whether you need all of that. I think is difficult. I can't really comment on the Monzo thing though. It's an interesting one. I've seen quite a lot of Monzo coming into the UK, but I think it's still relatively, I'd love to know the users, but I'd assume it's relatively US based, and it's grown in that market and it's probably looking to expand out. Whereas we probably see a lot more of Revolut because it's European based and grown through our markets. I don't know how widely known it would be in the US as an example, but that's the kind of thing where as we start to see the switch over, I wonder whether we'll see more of Monzo coming into this type of market and trying to grow, and equally Revolut in the US doing the same.
So Digit's AI-based general ledger over in the US have just announced a whole bunch of payroll integrations across 18 providers. So they've been pretty busy. That's not a small number. As most people know that have been listening to the pod, they'll know that this is like purely a US thing. And at the moment, it's got no real relevance to the UK market. But to add all of those additional payrolls in is quite striking. And actually, some of the direct competitors, I would say, because they've added QuickBooks, payroll, ADP, and a few other things which come out of some of the big ERP solutions. So that's all there. There's a lot of AI waffle in the press release, which sort of says about how they can automate posting, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, payroll can be quite complex, and the real test of a general ledger integration with a payroll solution is how do you manage things like cross-charging of people when they move between departments and areas, and how people want to account for that often gets lost, not necessarily in the payroll numbers, but often gets lost in the translation of payroll to accounting. So that would be my test if I was going to run this in real life and see if they can accommodate that.
Very nice. And then I'm going to end this week's pod on AI waffle, like you said. It's actually full circle to some of the stuff we're talking about with like even people being ready for MTD, people being ready for AI in general. And this is a piece of data that was State of the Nation, sponsored by Sage, was a piece that was released, and it talks about AI and accounting so fast. Cuts through the hype. Yes, AI is being used. In fact, 80% of the firms say they're already seeing at least some benefit from AI. Most of the value, though, is coming from basic efficiency gains. So things like reducing manual work, which accounts for about 41% of the benefits. So we're talking about speeding up admin, freeing up time, light touch automation, not anything transformative. And on the other side of the data, nearly 20% of firms say AI has had zero impact. Ooh. And another 20% say the impact is minimal. Again, I don't know who these firms are, but it would be very interesting to know if they're using technologies in the tech stack that actually are also assisting with AI. We've heard so much from Dext, we've heard so much from QuickBooks, we've heard from Starling, all the different ones that are all putting AI into their products right now and having an assist function. So despite all the noise, it's weird that half the market isn't seeing a meaningful value yet. And now layer in the behavior, 66% believe that AI is already embedded in their core software, which is what we're talking about here. But 71% are still using external tools. GPT, I mean, I don't know if you're still using ChatGPT. I think it's quite good for creative, but overall, we should all just switch to Claude. But it's good for things for a bit of research, which tells you something important. AI is being used, but not trusted in the core workflows. And we're not expecting that to change anytime soon because again, even with the releases that we've heard of this week, I guess we've seen things in QuickBooks, we've seen things from Briefcase. Yes, can they do the job that they need to do? Can they do the reconciliation? Can they do the fixed assets? But the question really is, what happens when they get it wrong? And I think that's what most people are holding out for here. It's still a bit of a blocker. It's not the skills, it's not the cost, it's the security. And that is cited by 62% of the firms in the round. So that is definitely a rejection of maybe trusting it completely with full responsibility. And I think that maybe the only way that's going to change is if it's a specific software that you have trusted for the last few years and you've liked everything they've done. Perhaps you're just more likely to trust them because you kind of think, oh, that's my Xero. Xero would never betray me. Or my QuickBooks loves me. But even though it only gave me 15 days to change the software completely for all my clients.
I think part of that trust issue comes from familiarity and knowledge and experience, and when it comes to using large language models. I mean, number one, what's most striking about those stats, right, is that almost every accounting firm has been using AI of some description if they've been using an OCR product or something like that for so long. So they must have seen an impact. And if they haven't seen an impact, then what the hell are they doing? Obviously, this debate now pivots purely around large language models, and they have a different kind of impact. And obviously firms are in much more of an experimental phase with the use of large language models and AI. But I guess, like I say, the big thing comes from just utilization, and it comes from familiarity of using a product. And then as these products add more functions, so you mentioned Claude, and Claude released a whole bunch of really exciting stuff with co-work and the ability to use it in Excel and PowerPoint, for example, two big classics that accountants love. And yet they're both beta products, and if you're not on one of your business subscriptions, there is a risk that your data could be leaked. But if you don't do your own research, don't find that out, you're never going to know these things.
Well, that brings this week's podcast to a close. We were covering a lot in the round of new releases, things to do with AI predominantly, and a lot from the bank's perspective. So if you've got some interesting perspectives on this, then get in touch with us. We would love to hear from you. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Our new host, Robbie, seems like he is taken to it like a duck to water. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll hopefully catch you on the next one.